Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. Instead of just telling you about one of history's most pivotal moments, I'm going to put you right in the middle of it, on the walls of Constantinople in 1453, watching 80,000 Ottoman soldiers prepare to end a 1,000-year empire. Picture this. You're about to experience what it felt like to stand at the literal edge of the medieval world, watching the future march toward you, with cannons the size of school buses. And spoiler alert, you're probably going to die. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations. You've just woken up on May 6th, 1453, and you're about to have the worst 2 months of your life. The good news, you're witnessing one of history's most dramatic turning points. The bad news, you're a Byzantine soldier standing on the walls of Constantinople, and there's an army outside that outnumbers you roughly 12 to 1. The worst news, that army has brought along some new toys that are about to make you impregnable. City walls look like a house of cards in a hurricane. Your name doesn't matter. History won't remember it anyway. You're just one of roughly 7,000 defenders in a city that once ruled half the known world. Now you're the last stubborn holdouts of an empire that's been slowly bleeding to death for 2 centuries. Take a deep breath. Actually, don't. The air tastes like fierce sweat, stale bread, and that particular metallic tang that hangs around when too many people are crammed together wondering if they're going to die. It's the medieval equivalent of that airplane smell, except instead of recycled air and peanuts, you get recycled terror and the distant sound of someone sharpening very large swords. Look out over the walls. See that sea of white tents stretching toward the horizon. That's the Ottoman army, and they've been setting up camp like they're planning the world's most violent music festival. Except instead of overpriced water bottles and porta potties, they've brought cannons. Lots of cannons, including one particular monster that's going to make your life very complicated very soon. The man responsible for your current predicament is Sultan Mehmed T. He's 21 years old, younger than most college graduates, and he's already decided he wants to own the most important city in the world. Imagine if Mark Zuckerberg had decided to conquer Rome instead of creating Facebook, except with better military strategy and considerably more ambition. Here's something they don't teach you in history class. Mehmed didn't just show up with a bigger army and hope for the best. This kid approached warfare like he was debugging code. He studied every failed siege attempt for the past 800 years, identified the problems, and systematically solved them. He hired Hungarian engineers to build cannons specifically designed to crack Constantinople's walls. He built a navy from scratch in 4 months. He even had the foresight to construct a massive chain across the Golden Horn, the medieval equivalent of Ctrl Alt Delete on your enemy's naval strategy. But let's talk about those walls you're standing on, because they're about to become very important to your continued existence. The Theodosian walls have protected Constantinople for over 1,000 years. They're 40 feet high, 15 feet thick, and have never, not once, been breached by force. They're the medieval equivalent of that one password you've been using since 2003 that somehow still works. 21 different armies have tried to break through these walls. The Arabs tried for 7 years and gave up. The Bulgars tried. The Russians tried twice. Even the Fourth Crusade had to sneak in through political manipulation because they couldn't punch through the stone. Your walls have a better track record than most marriage counselors. But here's the thing about technology. It has a nasty habit of making your best defenses obsolete overnight. Those walls were built to stop men with swords and catapults. They were not designed to handle Hungarian-built cannons firing 600-pound stone balls at close range. It's like trying to stop a freight train with a picket fence. Standing next to you on the walls are some interesting characters. There's Giovanni Giustiniani, a professional soldier from Genoa who showed up with 700 men and enough confidence to make you think this might actually work. He's basically the medieval equivalent of that one friend who insists they can fix your car even though they've never seen the engine. Except he actually knows what he's doing and has the scars to prove it. There are Venetian sailors who got trapped in the harbor when the siege began. Venetians are normally about as trustworthy as a gas station sushi, but when facing imminent death, they've proven surprisingly willing to help defend the city that's been their commercial rival for centuries. Nothing brings people together quite like the prospect of being murdered by cannons. You've also got Hungarian miners, Genoese crossbowmen, and a handful of Spanish and French knights who apparently thought a doomed siege sounded like fun. It's like the world's most dangerous international potluck, except instead of bringing casseroles, everyone brought weapons and a death wish. Your emperor, Constantine XI, is down there somewhere, probably trying to figure out how to defend a city with the population of a small college town against an army the size of a football stadium. He's the kind of leader who strips off his royal insignia before battle so the enemy can't identify his body afterward. That's either incredibly noble or the ultimate admission that you're absolutely screwed. The reality is both. You can hear them out there in the Ottoman camp. Thousands of voices speaking Turkish, Arabic, and languages you can't identify. They're not the barbarian horde your priests have been describing. These are professional soldiers with better equipment, better logistics, and better leadership than you've seen in your entire lifetime. They have field hospitals, organized supply lines, and a command structure that would make a modern army jealous. Meanwhile, your side is running on prayers, stubbornness, and the kind of desperate creativity that only emerges when the alternative is becoming a historical footnote. The sun is setting behind the Ottoman camp, and you're starting to understand something that historians would spend centuries debating. You're not just defending a city. You're standing at the exact moment when the medieval world ends and the modern world begins. Everything that happens in the next 53 days will echo through the next 500 years of human history. But you don't know that yet. Right now, all you know is that tomorrow, the cannons start firing, and you still think those walls might save you. You've had a restless night on the walls, and morning brings the kind of clarity you weren't hoping for. As the sun rises over the Bosphorus, you're getting your first real look at what's left of the Roman Empire. And it's not pretty. Welcome to the most embarrassing moment in imperial history. You're defending an empire that controls exactly one city. That's it. Just Constantinople and maybe a few fishing villages that haven't gotten the memo yet. It's like claiming you run a restaurant chain when all you have left is a hot dog cart in Central Park. Think about this for a moment. The empire that once stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, that built roads from Scotland to Syria, that ruled 50 million people at its peak. That empire now controls roughly 50 square miles of real estate. You could walk across the entire Byzantine Empire in about 4 hours if you took your time and stopped for lunch. But here's the truly beautiful irony. You still call yourselves Romans. Your emperor still uses the title Caesar. Your soldiers still march under the double-headed eagle. It's the political equivalent of insisting you're still driving a Ferrari when what you actually have is a rusted-out Honda Civic with 3 wheels and a prayer. How did it get this bad? Well, buckle up, because the story of Byzantine decline is like watching a slow-motion car crash that lasted 800 years. It started with the Fourth Crusade in 1204, and yes, you read that right. The Crusaders, who were supposed to be fighting Muslims in the Holy Land, decided it would be more profitable to sack Constantinople instead, because nothing says holy war like burning down the most important Christian city in the Eastern Mediterranean for pocket change. They stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and then they came back with crowbars for the stuff that was. The famous bronze horses of the Hippodrome, now decorating St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. Priceless relics, scattered across Western Europe. The imperial treasury, gone. It was basically the medieval equivalent of a liquidation sale, except nobody asked the owners if they wanted to liquidate. The Byzantines eventually got their city back in 1261, but by then the damage was done. It's like getting your house back after squatters have been living there for 60 years. Technically, it's still your house, but good luck making it livable again. Since then, you've been playing an increasingly desperate game of musical chairs with your territories. Every few decades, another chunk gets bitten off by the Ottomans, the Bulgars, the Serbs, or whoever happens to be having a good military year. By 1400, your empire consisted of Constantinople, a few islands, and the Peloponnese, which you promptly lost to the Ottomans anyway. You're now defending a city that can't feed itself, can't pay its soldiers, and can't repair its own walls. The imperial treasury is so empty that your emperor had to pawn the crown jewels just to buy grain for the winter. You're literally one step away from holding a bake sale to fund the imperial army. The population tells the whole sad story. Constantinople once housed over 400,000 people. Now you're looking at maybe 50,000 on a good day, and that's counting the stray dogs. Entire neighborhoods stand empty, their houses slowly crumbling into picturesque ruins. The Great Palace, once the wonder of the medieval world, is now partially collapsed and used for storing sheep. Sheep in the emperor's palace. Your economy is basically non-existent. The Ottomans control all your trade routes. The Genoese and Venetians have monopolized what's left of your commerce. Your money is so debased that foreign merchants demand payment in gold. Gold you don't have. The last time your government tried to issue new coins, they contained so little silver that merchants laughed at them. Actually laughed. The military situation is even worse. Your entire professional army consists of about 2,000 men, most of whom haven't been paid in months. You've got palace guards who are moonlighting as fishermen just to eat. Your navy is 7 ships, 3 of which aren't seaworthy. It's the kind of military that would lose a war against a particularly aggressive yacht club. But wait, there's more. Your empire is also in the middle of a religious civil war that's been going on for over a century. Half your people want to reunite with the Catholic Church in Rome, figuring that papal protection might be worth swallowing some pride. The other half would literally rather die than submit to the Pope. Guess which option you're about to test? Your priests spend more time arguing about theological minutiae than preparing for the siege. While Ottoman cannons are literally being wheeled into position outside your walls, your religious leaders are debating whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father alone or from the Father and the Son. It's like arguing about the color of your parachute while your plane is crashing. The Emperor, Constantine XI, is trying to hold this mess together through sheer force of will and what can only be described as spectacular denial. He sent desperate letters to every Christian ruler in Europe begging for help. The responses have been disappointing. The Pope offers to send aid if you reunite with Rome first. The Genoese offer to help for a price you can't afford. The Venetians are pretending they never got your messages. The French are busy fighting the English. The English are busy fighting the French. The Holy Roman Emperor is busy fighting everyone. Hungary is dealing with its own Ottoman problem. Poland is looking the other way and whistling. It's like posting on social media that your house is on fire and getting back 17. Thoughts and prayers, comments, and one guy trying to sell you insurance. Your best hope was a rumor about a Hungarian relief force, but as the weeks drag on, it's becoming clear that rumor was about as reliable as a weather forecast. You're beginning to suspect that the rest of Christian Europe has essentially written you off as a lost cause and is hoping the Ottomans will be too tired after conquering you to bother with anyone else. Which brings us to the strangest part of this whole situation morale. Despite everything, despite the impossible odds, the empty treasury, the lack of food, and the complete absence of help from your supposed allies, the people of Constantinople are not surrendering. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's the fact that surrender to the Ottomans comes with some fairly unpleasant traditional penalties involving your head and its sudden separation from your neck. But somehow, 7,000 defenders are preparing to face down an army 15 times their size. You're about to witness something remarkable. The moment when people who have absolutely no chance of winning decide to fight anyway. Not because they think they'll survive, but because some things are more important than survival. Of course, that's easy to say when you're not the one standing on the walls, listening to the sound of massive cannons being dragged into position just outside bow range. You're about to meet your nemesis, and honestly, you're going to be impressed despite yourself. Because the young man who's planning to end your empire isn't some bloodthirsty barbarian or religious fanatic. He's basically the Steve Jobs of medieval warfare. If Steve Jobs had decided that instead of revolutionizing smartphones, he'd revolutionize the art of blowing up cities. Meet Sultan Mehmed II, and try not to take it personally that he's younger than most people when they figure out what they want to do with their lives. At 21, he's already conquered more territory than most rulers manage in a lifetime. While you were learning to hold a sword properly, he was redesigning the entire concept of siege warfare. Here's what makes Mehmed terrifying. He doesn't just want to conquer Constantinople. He wants to do it perfectly. This isn't about revenge or religious fervor. It's about proving that old ways of thinking are obsolete. You're not facing a conqueror, you're facing a disruptor. Think about this. Every previous attempt to take Constantinople failed because commanders treated it like just another siege. Bring a big army, surround the city, wait for people to starve or surrender. It's the medieval equivalent of trying to break into an iPhone by hitting it with a hammer. Technically possible, but there are better ways. Mehmed looked at those failures and asked the most dangerous question in history. What if we did this completely differently? The answer to that question is currently pointing at your walls in the form of the largest cannons ever built. And when I say large, I mean these things make modern artillery look like water pistols. The biggest one, the one the Ottomans are calling Basilica, is 27 feet long, weighs 19 tons, and fires stone balls that weigh 600 pounds. That's not a cannon, that's a medieval death ray. To put this in perspective, Your ancestors fought off the Arabs with catapults that could throw 50-pound stones, maybe 300 yards on a good day. This Turkish monster can launch a projectile 12 times heavier over half a mile with enough force to punch through 15 feet of solid stone. It's like bringing a rocket launcher to a knife fight. Except the knife fight has been going on for 1,000 years, and everyone thought knives were the most advanced technology available. Here's the beautiful part. Mid didn't even invent these cannons himself. He hired a Hungarian engineer named Orban, who had originally offered his services to your emperor. Constantine said, "Thanks, but no thanks," probably because Orban wanted to be paid in actual money rather than promises and imperial titles. So Orban walked across the Bosphorus and offered his skills to the Ottomans instead. Mehmed took one look at Orban's plans and basically said, "Yes, build me the biggest, most destructive siege weapon in human history, and here's a blank check." It's the medieval equivalent of poaching your competitor's best software engineer and giving him unlimited resources to build whatever he wants. The result is an artillery park that would make Napoleon jealous. Mehmed has brought over 60 cannons to this siege, ranging from small field pieces to Orban's monster. They're organized, they're professionally crewed, and they're about to teach your 1,000-year-old walls some very modern lessons about physics. But the cannons are just the beginning. Look closer at that Ottoman camp, and you'll see something that should absolutely terrify you, organization. This isn't a medieval army that showed up and hoped for the best. This is a military machine that would fit right into the 19th century. They have field engineers who surveyed the best positions for artillery before a single cannon was unloaded. They have a logistics corps that calculated exactly how much gunpowder, food, and water they'd need for a 2-month siege. They have a medical corps with actual doctors instead of just barbers with sharp knives and good intentions. Their camp is laid out in perfect geometric patterns with designated areas for different units, supply depots, and even latrines. Yes, latrines. While your people are doing their business wherever convenient, the Ottomans have engineered a sanitation system for 80 Zolos and men. It's like comparing a music festival campground to a military base. Mehmed has also solved the one problem that's protected Constantinople for centuries, the Golden Horn. That harbor has been sealed off by a massive chain since the city was built, making naval attack impossible. Previous besiegers have spent years trying to break that chain or find ways around it. Mehmed's solution? He built a road. A road over the hills behind Galata, greased it with animal fat, and literally dragged 70 ships over land and into the Golden Horn behind your defenses. It took one night. Your supposedly impregnable harbor now has an enemy fleet sitting in it like uninvited guests at a dinner party. When your people woke up and saw Ottoman ships where no ships should be able to exist, the psychological effect was devastating. It's like discovering that someone has parked their army in your bedroom. Technically impossible, but there they are anyway. This is what modern strategic thinking looks like applied to medieval warfare. While your commanders are still fighting the last war, Mehmed is inventing the next one. He's not just adapting to circumstances, he's creating new circumstances that favor his strengths and exploit your weaknesses. The man has even gamified the siege. He's offering bonuses to the first soldiers over your walls, promotion opportunities for exceptional service, and a 3-day sack of the city if his men succeed. Meanwhile, he's broadcasting to your defenders that surrender means mercy, while resistance means, well, let's just say Ottoman tradition regarding stubborn cities is not encouraging for your future health prospects. But here's what really sets Mehmed apart. He's patient. most 21. Year-olds with the largest army in the region would have ordered an immediate assault the moment they arrived. Not Mehmed. He's perfectly willing to spend weeks positioning his cannons, building his road, and letting psychological pressure do half the work for him. He knows that every day you spend looking at his perfectly organized camp, listening to his cannons being tested, and watching your own supplies dwindle is a day closer to your breaking point. Time is on his side, and he's using it like a weapon. Your spies. And yes, you still have a few. Report that Mehmed spends his evenings reading. Not just military manuals, but philosophy, mathematics, and histories of previous sieges. He's apparently working his way through accounts of every failed attempt to take Constantinople, taking notes on what went wrong and how to do it better. It's like facing someone who's spent years studying video of your every game, identified all your weaknesses, and designed the perfect strategy to exploit them. Except instead of losing a sports match, you're about to lose an empire. The most terrifying part, he's not done innovating. Those cannons pointing at your walls are just the opening move. Mehmed has backup plans for his backup plans, and contingencies for scenarios you haven't even thought of yet. Tomorrow those cannons start firing, and you're about to discover what happens when medieval fortifications meet Renaissance engineering. The first cannon shot wakes you from the kind of sleep that wasn't really sleep anyway. More like extended blinking with your eyes closed. It's 5:47 a.m. on April 12th, and congratulations, you're about to experience something no human being in history has ever experienced before, being on the receiving end of industrial-scale artillery bombardment. The sound is indescribable. Imagine the loudest thunder you've ever heard, multiply it by 50, then add the sound of the world's largest building falling down. Now imagine that sound is specifically designed to kill you. That's your wake-up call, and it's going to repeat every 7 minutes for the next 53 days. You scramble to your feet on the wall, and the first thing you notice is the dust. Not just any dust. This is powdered stone, powdered mortar, and what you're desperately hoping isn't powdered human being. All mixed together in a cloud that makes breathing feel like gargling with sandpaper. The medieval equivalent of a dust storm, except the dust used to be part of your city's defenses. Look at the wall where Orban's monster cannon just hit. There's a hole in the Theodosian walls. A hole that's roughly the size of a small house, punched clean through stone that's been standing since the year 413. It's like watching someone take a sledgehammer to the Mona Lisa, except the Mona Lisa was the only thing keeping you alive. The second shot comes exactly 7 minutes later, because apparently the Ottomans have turned mass destruction into a precise science. This time you're ready for the sound, but you're not ready for what happens next. The 600-pound stone ball doesn't just hit the wall. It punches through the outer layer, continues through the inner core, and explodes out the back in a shower of stone fragments that turn the air into a lethal snow globe. One of those fragments, a piece of 1,000-year-old masonry about the size of your fist, whistles past your head close enough that you can feel the wind displacement. You've just been missed by a chunk of history traveling at roughly the speed of a medieval bullet train. Here's something they don't tell you about artillery bombardment. It's not just about the direct hits. Each cannon shot creates a percussion wave that travels through the ground, up through the walls, and into your bones. After the first hour, you start to understand why siege defenders in previous centuries could hold out for years. They weren't dealing with earthquakes every 7 minutes. Your ears are ringing so badly that you can't hear the orders being shouted by your officers. Not that it matters. The orders are mostly variations of "don't die," and try to fix that hole in the wall with whatever you can find. It's like trying to repair a burst dam with duct tape and wishful thinking. The third shot hits lower, right at the base of the wall. The impact creates a small avalanche of stone and mortar, and you watch in fascination as a section of wall that's been standing since before your great-grandfather was born simply disappears. One moment it's there, the next it's rubble scattered across the courtyard like someone kicked over a sandcastle. But the real horror isn't the destruction, it's the efficiency. The Ottoman gunners aren't just firing randomly. They're systematically targeting the weakest points in your defenses, the places where different construction periods meet, the spots where repairs have been made over the centuries. It's like watching a surgeon dissect a patient, except the patient is your city and the surgeon is trying to kill it. By noon, the pattern is clear. Every 7 minutes, another hole appears in your walls. The Ottoman cannons are working in sequence. As soon as one fires, another takes up the bombardment while the first one cools and reloads. It's the medieval equivalent of a factory assembly line, except the product being manufactured is your destruction. The psychological effect is almost worse than the physical damage. You can't eat, you can't sleep. You can't even think properly when you know that every 7 minutes, a building-sized piece of stone is going to come flying at you with the force of divine judgment. It's like living inside a giant's game of whack-a-mole, except you're the mole and the giant has unlimited quarters. Your fellow defenders are starting to crack. Not the walls. Well, the walls are definitely cracking, but the men. You've seen soldiers who've fought in dozens of battles reduced to gibbering wrecks by the constant bombardment. There's something uniquely terrifying about facing an enemy you can't fight back against, who can kill you from half a mile away without even seeing your face. The work details trying to repair the walls are having an increasingly difficult time. It's hard to move stones when every 7 minutes the ground shakes like an earthquake. It's harder to concentrate on masonry when pieces of your city keep exploding around you, and it's nearly impossible to maintain morale when your repairs are getting blown apart faster than you can make them. But here's the thing that's really going to keep you up at night. The Ottomans are just getting started. That monster cannon that's been terrorizing you all day. It's just one of over 60 pieces of artillery pointing at your city. The others have been mostly quiet, probably because Mimid wants you to focus on the big one. To really understand what you're facing, around 3 p.m., they start firing the smaller cannons. Not the monsters, just the regular, sized pieces that could punch through a castle wall but seem almost quaint compared to Orban's creation. The bombardment shifts from one devastating hit every 7 minutes to a constant rain of stone balls that makes the walls sound like they're being beaten with giant hammers. The noise is indescribable. It's not just the cannons firing, it's the sound of impact, the crash of falling masonry, the crack of stone under stress, and underneath it all, the growing rumble of an entire city's defenses slowly coming apart. It's like standing inside a drum that's being beaten by a herd of elephants with anger management issues. You try to count the shots, but you lose track after the 100th direct hit. The walls that protected Constantinople for over 1,000 years are developing more holes than a Swiss cheese factory. Each impact sends up a cloud of dust that hangs in the air like fog until the whole city is shrouded in a gritty, choking haze that tastes like centuries of crumbling stone. The worst part, you can see the Ottoman artillerymen between shots, calmly swabbing out their cannons, adjusting their aim, and preparing the next round. They're not frenzied warriors drunk on bloodlust. They're technicians doing a job. Professional destroyers of cities, punching in and out like any other workforce, except their office is a siege camp and their productivity is measured in the number of holes they can blow in your defenses. By evening, the bombardment slows to a more manageable pace. Only one shot every 10 minutes or so. The Ottomans are probably letting their cannons cool down, checking for cracks in the barrels, and calculating tomorrow's targets. They're treating the destruction of your city like an engineering project, complete with schedules and quality control. You take advantage of the relative quiet to survey the damage, and it's worse than you imagined. The outer wall, the one that's supposed to be impregnable, looks like it's been gnawed on by a giant with very large teeth. There are gaps, cracks, and weak points everywhere. The inner wall is still mostly intact, but it was never designed to be your first line of defense. Most unsettling of all, you can hear the Ottomans working through the night. Not just the artillerymen preparing for tomorrow's bombardment, but engineers, surveyors, and construction crews. They're building earthworks to protect their cannons, digging trenches to get closer to your walls, and constructing the kind of sophisticated siege works that would make a Roman general weep with envy. This isn't just a siege, it's a demolition project, and you're living inside the buildings scheduled for destruction. Tomorrow, they're going to try something new. You're starting to realize that those Ottoman cannons outside might not be your biggest problem. Sure, they're systematically turning your walls into gravel, but at least they're honest about wanting to kill you. The real threat is sitting right next to you at the dinner table, singing in the same church choir, and collecting the same paychecks. If there were any paychecks left to collect. Welcome to the wonderful world of internal Byzantine politics, where betrayal is an art form and loyalty is a luxury nobody can afford. Let's start with the obvious traitors, the ones everyone knows about but nobody talks about. Half the merchants in your city have been secretly trading with the Ottomans for years. While you've been preparing for siege, they've been shipping grain, weapons, and intelligence across the Bosphorus in exchange for Ottoman gold. It's the medieval equivalent of selling weapons to both sides in a war, except more personal, because these people are your neighbors. These aren't desperate people making desperate choices. These are calculating businessmen who've run the numbers and decided that Ottoman victory is inevitable. They're hedging their bets, making sure they'll be on the winning side regardless of who controls the city when the dust settles. It's like having a neighbor who's already practicing their victory dance while your house is still on fire. The Genoese quarter is particularly interesting. Officially, Genoa is neutral in this conflict. Unofficially, individual Genoese merchants are playing both sides so hard they make Swiss bankers look like amateurs. They're selling supplies to your defenders during the day and sending intelligence to Mimid at night. Some of them are literally betting on how long the siege will last, with inside information about your food supplies. But the merchants are small, time compared to the religious civil war that's been tearing your city apart for decades. Remember the theological debate about whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father alone or from the Father and the Son. That seemingly academic question has split Constantinople into two warring camps that hate each other more than they hate the Ottomans. The Unionists want to reunite with Rome, accepting papal authority in exchange for Western military support. The Orthodox faction would rather die than submit to the Pope. And guess what? They're about to get their wish, because their refusal to compromise has guaranteed that no significant help is coming from Western Europe. Here's the beautiful irony. While you're facing cannons that could level mountains, your religious leaders are still arguing about liturgical details. The Patriarch spends more time drafting angry letters about Catholic theological errors than organizing the city's spiritual defense. It's like debating the proper way to arrange deck chairs while the Titanic is sinking, except with more Latin and considerably more eternal damnation. The Emperor tried to force a compromise by agreeing to church union with Rome. The result was riots in the streets, death threats against anyone who attended the unification ceremony, and a popular boycott of the Hagia Sophia. Your own people literally refused to worship in their most sacred space because it had been contaminated by Catholic influence. So let's recap. You're facing the largest siege army in history, your walls are being demolished by advanced artillery, and your population has decided this is the perfect time for a religious civil war. It's like having a family argument during a home invasion. Technically, you're all on the same side, but you're too busy screaming at each other to notice the burglars carrying out your furniture. The economic situation is even more surreal. Your imperial treasury is so empty that Constantine had to melt down church ornaments to pay his soldiers. The soldiers, understandably, are not thrilled about receiving wages in the form of recycled altar decorations. Morale is hard to maintain when your paycheck used to be part of a crucifix. But here's where it gets really ugly. Some of those soldiers have stopped caring about getting paid by their own government. Ottoman agents have been infiltrating the city for months, offering gold to anyone willing to provide information about troop movements, supply levels, or weak points in the defenses. And people are taking the money. You're literally being betrayed by people who are supposed to be defending the same walls you're standing on. That guy next to you, who's been complaining about the food, he might be reporting your garrison strength to enemy agents. That merchant who's been supplying your unit with extra bread, he's probably padding his profit margins by charging you double and selling your location to Ottoman spies. The Hungarian miners who came to help with your defenses are a perfect example of how complicated loyalty has become. They're genuinely trying to help, using their expertise to dig counter tunnels and reinforce weak points in the walls. But they're also in contact with Hungarian prisoners in the Ottoman camp, trading information about conditions inside the city. They claim it's just exchanging news with countrymen, but intelligence is intelligence. Even your allies are questionable. The Venetian sailors trapped in the harbor by the siege are helping defend the city. But they're also secretly negotiating with Mehmed about the terms of their surrender when the city falls. They want guarantees that their ships and cargo will be protected, and they're perfectly willing to provide detailed information about your naval defenses in exchange. It's like being in a poker game where half the players are showing their cards to the dealer and charging him for the privilege. The worst part is the passive betrayal. The people who aren't actively helping the enemy, but have already mentally surrendered. These are the citizens who've started learning basic Turkish phrases, who've been quietly converting small valuables into portable gold, and who spend their time making plans for life under Ottoman rule rather than preparing for defense. You can see it in their faces when the cannons fire. Instead of determination or fear, there's resignation. They're not wondering if the city will fall. They're wondering when it will fall, and whether they'll survive the transition. They've become tourists in their own destruction, watching history happen to them, rather than trying to change it. Your government isn't helping matters. The imperial bureaucracy, what's left of it, is still operating as if this were a normal diplomatic crisis that can be solved through proper paperwork and protocol. They're drafting formal complaints about Ottoman violations of previous treaties, as if Mehmed is going to read a legal brief and suddenly decide to pack up his cannons and go home. Meanwhile, the real decisions are being made in secret meetings between people who've already accepted that the empire is finished. They're not plotting to save Constantinople. They're negotiating the terms of its surrender. Your own leadership is engaging in what can only be described as pre-emptive collaboration. But perhaps the most heartbreaking betrayal is the one that hasn't happened, yet Europe's abandonment of the last Christian stronghold in the East. Your desperate letters requesting aid have been received, filed, and forgotten by rulers who are too busy with their own problems to care about yours. The Holy Roman Emperor sends thoughts and prayers. The Pope offers spiritual support contingent on religious submission. The French king is dealing with English invasions. The English king is dealing with French invasions. Poland is looking the other way. Hungary has its own Ottoman problems. It's the medieval equivalent of posting about your emergency on social media and getting a bunch of sending good vibes responses from people who immediately scroll on to cat videos. You're surrounded by enemies outside your walls and questionable allies inside them. The cannons are destroying your defenses. Your own people are selling intelligence to your enemies, and your supposed friends have essentially written you off as a lost cause. But somehow, incredibly, you're still fighting. Maybe it's because you don't have any other choice. Maybe it's because surrender means death anyway. Or maybe it's because, in the face of universal betrayal, the only thing left is to be loyal to something, even if that something is doomed. Tomorrow, you're going to discover that those walls you've been depending on are more fragile than anyone imagined. You've been living in denial for the past week, and this morning reality is about to hit you with the force of a 600-pound cannonball. Standing on what's left of the Theodosian walls at dawn on April 18th, you're looking at something that should be impossible. There's a gap in your defenses. Not just a hole. You've gotten used to holes. This is a gap wide enough to march an army through, carved into fortifications that have stood for over 1,000 years without a single breach. Your mind is having trouble processing what you're seeing. It's like discovering that the laws of physics have been suspended, or that your childhood home has simply vanished overnight. These walls were built by Theodosius Sicu in 413 AD and reinforced continuously for 10 centuries. They've survived earthquakes, sieges, civil wars, and the rise and fall of empires. They've been your definition of permanence in a world where everything else changes. Now they look like a broken smile, with gaps where teeth used to be. The breach is roughly 30 feet wide enough for 20 men to charge through shoulder to shoulder. The edges are jagged, revealing the internal structure of walls that were never meant to be seen from this angle. You can actually see the different layers of construction, the various repairs and reinforcements added over the centuries, like geological strata in a cliff face. But here's what's really unsettling. The Ottomans aren't even trying to hide their satisfaction. You can see their engineers in the distance, pointing at the breach and taking measurements. They're treating your catastrophic defensive failure like a successful science experiment, probably calculating how to replicate their results in other sections of the wall. Mehmed's artillery has been systematically targeting the same spot for days, and you're finally understanding what concentrated firepower means in practical terms. It's not just about having bigger cannons. It's about applying modern military engineering to medieval fortifications with the precision of a surgical strike. Your walls were designed to withstand the kind of siege weapons available in the 5th century: catapults, ballista, and battering rams. The engineers who built them never imagined artillery that could deliver the equivalent of a small earthquake to the same spot every 7 minutes for weeks on end. It's like trying to stop a machine gun with armor designed to deflect arrows. The mathematics are brutal. Each shot from Orban's monster cannon delivers roughly 16 tons of kinetic energy to a single point. Your walls can absorb that kind of impact once, maybe twice, but after 200 direct hits to the same location, even stone that's been standing for a millennium starts to behave like sand. You're witnessing the end of an era in military architecture. For the past 1,000 years, defensive technology has held the advantage over offensive technology. Cities with good walls could hold out against armies 10 times their size, because gunpowder siege weapons simply couldn't generate enough force to break through properly constructed fortifications. All of that just changed overnight. Gunpowder artillery doesn't just make your walls obsolete, it makes the entire concept of static defense obsolete. From now on, wars will be won by mobility, firepower, and logistics rather than by hiding behind stone barriers and hoping for the best. But you don't have the luxury of contemplating military history, because the Ottomans are already adapting their tactics to exploit your new vulnerability. Instead of continuing the bombardment, they've shifted to a different strategy. They're bringing up fascines, bundles of wood and earth that can be thrown into the breach to create a crude ramp for assault troops. It's brilliant in its simplicity. Why spend more time and gunpowder widening the breach when you can just fill it with construction materials and use it as a highway into your city? They're literally building a road through your defenses using your own rubble as raw material. Your engineers are frantically trying to repair the damage, but they're fighting a losing battle against physics. Medieval masonry techniques don't work when you're trying to rebuild a wall while it's actively being destroyed. It's like trying to build a sandcastle during high tide. Theoretically possible, but the environment is working against you. The work crews are brave to the point of insanity. They're hauling stones and mortar into the breach while Ottoman sharpshooters are taking potshots at anyone who shows themselves. Every few minutes, another mason gets picked off by a crossbow bolt or an early musket shot. You're literally watching men die for the privilege of moving rocks from one pile to another. But even if they could work unmolested, the repairs wouldn't hold. You're trying to fix damage that required weeks of concentrated artillery fire to create. And you're doing it with tools and techniques that haven't changed since the Roman Empire. It's like trying to repair a car engine with a blacksmith's hammer. The psychological impact on your fellow defenders is devastating. These men have spent their entire lives believing that Constantinople was unconquerable because of its walls. That's not just military doctrine, it's fundamental to their identity as Byzantines. You live in the city that cannot be taken, defended by walls that cannot be breached. Except now they can be breached, and everyone can see the proof. Morale isn't just low, it's existential. You're not just facing defeat. You're facing the collapse of everything you thought you knew about warfare, defense, and your own place in the world. It's like discovering that the sun actually does revolve around the Earth, or that gravity works in reverse on Tuesdays. Some of your fellow soldiers are deserting. Not just the foreign mercenaries who never had much investment in Byzantine survival, but local men who've lived in Constantinople their entire lives. They're looking at that breach and making the rational calculation that their family's survival is more important than their loyalty to a doomed empire. You can't blame them. The walls were the only reason this siege wasn't over on the first day. Without them, you're just 7,000 exhausted defenders facing 80,000 professional soldiers who have better weapons, better training, and better everything. It's not a battle, it's a mathematical inevitability. But here's the strangest part: Constantine XI isn't surrendering. Despite the breach, despite the desertion, despite the complete collapse of his defensive strategy, your emperor is doubling down on resistance. He's personally supervising the repair efforts, encouraging the workers, and acting as if this is just a minor setback rather than the end of everything. Either he's the bravest man in history, or he's completely lost touch with reality. At this point, both options seem equally likely. The Ottoman camp is bustling with activity. They're not just preparing for an assault through the breach. They're building the kind of sophisticated siege, works that suggest they're planning to take their time and do this properly. Trenches, earthworks, protected approaches, and what looks suspiciously like preparation for undermining operations. Mimid isn't just planning to storm through that breach. He's planning to create multiple breaches, multiple assault routes, and multiple layers of attack that will overwhelm your ability to respond. This isn't just military conquest. It's systematic demolition of your entire defensive concept. You're getting a preview of 16th century warfare in the 15th century, and it's terrifying. This is what happens when medieval military systems collide with Renaissance technology and modern organizational methods. It's not just that you're losing. It's that you're losing to an enemy operating with fundamentally different assumptions about how wars should be fought. The most unsettling realization is that even if you somehow managed to repair this breach, it wouldn't matter. The Ottomans have demonstrated that they can create new breaches whenever they want, wherever they want. Your walls aren't just damaged, they're irrelevant. You're defending a medieval city with medieval methods against an enemy that's already fighting a modern war. It's like bringing a sword to a gunfight, except the sword is made of good intentions and the gun is made of mathematics. Tonight, you're going to learn what happens when unstoppable force meets very stoppable objects. You're about to meet some of the most remarkable people in history, and the tragic part is that most of them are going to die in the next few weeks. But before they do, they're going to show you what actual competence looks like in the middle of a military disaster. Standing on the ruined walls this morning, you notice something different about the men working to repair the breach. These aren't the exhausted, demoralized local defenders you've been fighting alongside for weeks. These are professionals, and they move with the kind of confidence that comes from actually knowing what they're doing. Meet Giovanni Giustiniani, and try not to fall in love with him, because this story doesn't have happy endings. Giustiniani is a Genoese condottiero, a professional soldier who showed up in January with 700 men and a reputation for making impossible defensive situations merely improbable. He's the medieval equivalent of a special forces operator, except instead of sneaking around enemy territory, he specializes in holding positions that everyone else has written off as indefensible. Here's what makes him different from every other military commander you've encountered. He actually studied your situation before accepting the job. While other potential allies were sending thoughts and prayers, Giustiniani was reading intelligence reports, studying maps of your fortifications, and calculating supply requirements. He showed up knowing exactly what he was getting into. which makes his presence either incredibly brave or completely insane. Probably both. The man is 45 years old, which makes him ancient by medieval military standards, and he has scars that tell the story of every siege, battle, and military disaster in the Mediterranean for the past 20 years. He's like a walking encyclopedia of how not to die in hopeless military situations, and remarkably, he's still alive to share that knowledge. What's immediately obvious is that Giustiniani operates on a completely different level from your Byzantine commanders. While they're still thinking in terms of traditional siege defense, man the walls, shoot arrows, pray for relief, he's treating this like a modern engineering problem that happens to involve people trying to kill him. His first act after arriving was to completely reorganize your defensive positions. Those gaps in the wall that your people were frantically trying to fill with rubble, Giustiniani turned them into kill zones, positioning crossbowmen and arquebusiers to create overlapping fields of fire that turn any assault into a shooting gallery. The breach that's been giving you nightmares. Giustiniani looked at it and saw an opportunity. Instead of trying to rebuild the wall, he's constructed an inner defensive line behind the breach, complete with portable barriers that can be moved to create choke points. It's like turning your biggest weakness into a trap for anyone stupid enough to charge through it. But Giustiniani isn't working alone. Somehow, word of Constantinople's desperate situation has attracted the kind of people who make a hobby of showing up to hopeless battles, just to see if they can change the outcome. There's a contingent of Hungarian miners who volunteered to help with your defensive preparations. These men normally spend their time digging for silver, but they've applied their underground expertise to military engineering. They're currently burrowing beneath the Ottoman siege works, preparing to give Mehmed's army a very unpleasant surprise involving large amounts of gunpowder in small spaces. The Hungarians are led by a man called Orban. Not the same Orban who's building cannons for the Ottomans, because apparently Orban was the medieval equivalent of John, and everyone in Eastern Europe was named either Orban or Stefan. This Orban specializes in making things explode at precisely the right moment, which is exactly the kind of expertise you need when facing superior numbers. You've also got a collection of Venetian sailors who were trapped in the harbor when the siege began. Under normal circumstances, Venetians are about as trustworthy as a used car salesman with a gambling problem. But facing imminent death has a wonderful way of clarifying priorities, and these particular Venetians have decided that dying rich is less appealing than living poor. They've brought something invaluable to your defense: actual naval expertise. While your people have been treating the Golden Horn like a lake that happens to have ships on it, the Venetians understand that water is a battlefield just like land. They've been organizing fire ship attacks, amphibious raids, and naval mining operations that have made the Ottoman fleet's life considerably more complicated. There's even a small group of Spanish knights who showed up for reasons that nobody fully understands. Spain is currently busy reconquering itself from the Muslims, but apparently some Spanish nobles decided that wasn't enough Islamic conquest to oppose and traveled 2,000 miles to fight more Muslims in a completely different war. These aren't desperate mercenaries or political refugees. These are professional soldiers who could be making good money in safer conflicts, but instead chose to volunteer for what everyone knows is a suicide mission. It's like joining the crew of the Titanic after you've already heard about the iceberg. What's remarkable is how these international volunteers have transformed your defensive capabilities. A month ago, your military strategy consisted of standing on walls and hoping for divine intervention. Now you have coordinated artillery positions, organized counter, mining operations, and actual tactical flexibility. Giustiniani has even solved some problems that your own commanders never recognized as problems. That issue with different units not communicating effectively. He's established a chain of command that actually makes sense. The problem with soldiers not knowing their assigned positions during an assault. He's created a system of signals and fallback positions that would make a Roman centurion proud. Most importantly, he's restored something you didn't realize you'd lost: professional pride. For months, your defenders have been acting like victims waiting for inevitable defeat. Giustiniani's men treat the siege like a job that they're professionally qualified to handle. They don't expect to win. They're not stupid, but they expect to make the enemy pay such a high price for victory that it won't feel like winning. The psychological effect on your fellow defenders has been dramatic. Suddenly, men who were talking about desertion are volunteering for the most dangerous assignments. Soldiers who couldn't hold their positions under bombardment are now competing to serve in Giustiniani's units. It's amazing what a little competent leadership can do for morale, even in hopeless situations. But perhaps the most impressive thing about these international volunteers is that they're not here for money, glory, or political advantage. They're here because they believe in something that's worth defending, even if that something is doomed. It's the last manifestation of medieval chivalry, the idea that some causes are worth fighting for regardless of the odds. These men have looked at the situation, calculated the chances of survival, and decided that dying for the right reason is better than living for the wrong one. They represent something that's about to disappear from the world: the notion that individual honor matters more than practical politics. That some things are more important than survival, and that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that's guaranteed to get you killed. You're fighting alongside the last knights, in the last battle where knightly virtues will make any difference at all. After Constantinople falls, warfare will be about mathematics, logistics, and technology. Personal courage will still matter, but it won't be enough to change outcomes anymore. But for these few weeks, in this doomed city, these remarkable men are proving that sometimes competence and courage can make the impossible merely unlikely. Tomorrow, you're going to watch your emperor make the most difficult decision any ruler has ever faced. You're about to witness something that happens maybe once every 1,000 years. A man choosing to die as a hero instead of living as a coward, and making that choice with full knowledge of what it means. It's May 28th, and Emperor Constantine XI is standing in what's left of the imperial palace, staring at a pile of purple silk that represents 11 centuries of Roman imperial tradition. That pile of fabric has been worn by 88 emperors before him, from Augustus Caesar to his own brother John Thing. It's more than clothing. It's the physical manifestation of an idea that has shaped the Western world for over a millennium. And he's about to take it off forever. You can see the exact moment when Constantine makes his decision, and it's not what you'd expect from a man facing the end of everything. There's no dramatic speech, no divine revelation, no suddenly discovered military strategy that might save the day. There's just a middle-aged man in an impossible situation, quietly choosing dignity over survival. Here's what makes this moment so remarkable: Constantine has options. Real options. Not good options, but options nonetheless. Mehmed has offered him terms. Generous terms, actually: surrender the city, convert to Islam, and rule as an Ottoman vassal. Keep your title, keep your palace, keep your life. All you have to do is acknowledge that your empire is finished and your god was wrong. It's the kind of deal that most rulers in his position would grab with both hands. There are ships in the harbor, Genoese vessels, Venetian galleys, even a few Byzantine ships that could spirit him away to safety in Crete or the Peloponnese. He could live out his days in comfortable exile, writing memoirs about the fall of the empire and accepting sympathy from Western European courts. He could even do what most of his predecessors did when facing impossible odds: flee to a monastery, take religious vows, and spend his remaining years praying for forgiveness and practicing calligraphy. It's the traditional Byzantine solution to political failure. Trade your crown for a prayer book and let someone else deal with the consequences. But Constantine isn't most rulers. He's the last emperor of Rome, and he's apparently decided that the last emperor of Rome doesn't get to choose the easy way out. Watch him as he removes the imperial regalia, piece by piece. The crown that Justinian wore when he reconquered the Mediterranean. The scepter that Constantine the Great carried when he founded this city. The purple cloak that has been the symbol of Roman authority since before Christianity existed. He's not being forced to remove these things. He's choosing to. He's deliberately transforming himself from Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, ruler of the Roman Empire, into Constantine Dragosis, just another soldier preparing to die for his city. It's the medieval equivalent of a CEO choosing to go down with his company instead of taking a golden parachute. Except the stakes are higher, the symbolism is deeper, and the consequences are permanent. His few remaining advisors are begging him to reconsider. These are practical men who understand that dead emperors can't rebuild empires. That martyrdom is a luxury they can't afford. That sometimes strategic retreat is the only rational choice. They're not wrong, but they're missing the point. Constantine isn't thinking like a politician anymore. He's thinking like the personification of an idea that's about to die with him. He understands that how the Roman Empire ends matters as much as the fact that it's ending. Future historians will judge not just his failure, but how he chose to fail. Here's the conversation he has with his closest advisor, Gennadios Scholarios, and it's going to break your heart. Your Majesty, a living emperor in exile can someday return. A dead emperor can do nothing. Gennadios, an emperor who abandons his city is no emperor at all. Better to die as Constantine the Last than live as Constantine the Exile. That's not bravado talking. That's a man who's thought this through and reached a conclusion that he can live with, or in this case, die with. But the most remarkable thing about Constantine's decision isn't the dramatic gesture. It's the quiet competence with which he prepares for it. He spends his last day as emperor handling the practical details of dying well. He writes letters. Not desperate pleas for help or angry denunciations of his enemies, but carefully crafted instructions for the few Byzantines who might survive the siege. How to preserve important documents. Which officials to trust if they're offered positions in the Ottoman administration. How to maintain Greek Orthodox traditions under Muslim rule. He's basically writing the user manual for the end of his empire, and he's doing it with the same attention to detail that his predecessors used when planning military campaigns or diplomatic negotiations. He prays, but not for divine intervention or miraculous rescue. He prays for the strength to die well, for forgiveness for his failures, and for the souls of the men who are going to die with him tomorrow. It's the prayer of a man who's already accepted defeat, but refuses to accept dishonor. Most importantly, he visits his soldiers, not as an emperor reviewing his troops, But as Constantine Dragus is saying goodbye to friends who've chosen to stay with him until the end, he stops at every defensive position, thanks every unit personally, and makes sure that each man understands that tomorrow they're not dying for the Byzantine Empire, they're dying for each other. He's transforming a hopeless military situation into a brotherhood of shared sacrifice. The effect on morale is extraordinary. Men who were ready to desert are now competing for the honor of standing next to their emperor in the final battle. Soldiers who haven't been paid in months are offering to share their last meals with Constantine. It's like watching a football team suddenly discover they're willing to die for their coach. But perhaps the most moving moment comes when Constantine visits the Hagia Sophia for the last time as emperor. The great church is packed with defenders and civilians, Orthodox and Catholic, Byzantine and foreign, all praying together in languages and traditions that have been at war with each other for centuries. Constantine doesn't deliver a grand speech. He doesn't promise victory or divine intervention. He simply says, "We commend ourselves, our city, and our empire to God. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." And then he does something that no Roman emperor has done for 11 centuries. He asks forgiveness from his people, not for losing the war. Everyone understands that was inevitable, but for any failures of leadership that might have made their suffering worse than necessary, it's a moment of humility that transforms Constantine from a political figure into a human being, and it transforms his people from subjects into partners in whatever's about to happen. As night falls, Constantine dismisses his remaining servants, releases his courtiers from their oaths of loyalty, and distributes the last of the imperial treasury to his soldiers. He's not just abandoning the throne, he's systematically dismantling it, making sure that when he dies, the institution dies with him rather than being corrupted by survival. His final act as emperor is to write a letter to his nephew in the Peloponnese, instructing him never to claim the imperial title, never to attempt to restore the empire, and never to forget that sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is know when to end things properly. Tomorrow morning, Constantine Dragus will pick up a sword and shield like any common soldier and walk toward the breach in the Theodosian walls. He won't be wearing purple, he won't be surrounded by bodyguards, and he won't be identifiable as anything more than another defender choosing to die for his city. It's the most powerful political statement in human history, the voluntary transformation of the last emperor of Rome into the first citizen of a memory. You're about to watch 480 years of continuous Roman imperial tradition end not with a whimper, but with a man who understood that how you choose to lose defines you more than how you manage to win. It's 1:30 a.m. on May 29th, 1453, and you're about to experience the loudest, most terrifying, and historically significant 3 hours of human warfare ever recorded. The final assault on Constantinople is about to begin, and you have a front row seat to the end of the world as you know it. You haven't slept. Nobody has slept. The Ottoman camp has been a hive of activity all night. Thousands of men moving into position, weapons being distributed, final prayers being offered in a dozen different languages. It sounds like the world's most violent summer camp, preparing for the most deadly capture, the flag game in history. The first wave comes at you like a natural disaster with malicious intent. These aren't Mehmed's elite soldiers. These are the Bashi Bazouks, irregular troops whose job is basically to tire you out before the real soldiers arrive. Think of them as the medieval equivalent of a denial of service attack, not necessarily lethal individually, but designed to overwhelm your defenses through sheer volume and chaos. They come screaming out of the darkness carrying ladders, grappling hooks, and the kind of desperate courage that comes from knowing you're expendable. The noise is indescribable. Imagine every sports riot, political protest, and New Year's celebration you've ever heard, then multiply by 1,000 and add the specific sound of people trying to kill each other. You're firing arrows into a human sea that just keeps coming. Every shot finds a target, but there are always more targets. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket, except the ocean is full of people who want to murder you and everyone you've ever cared about. The scaling ladders go up against the walls in dozens of places simultaneously. These aren't the careful, tactical assaults you've been expecting. This is pure chaos. Human bodies thrown against stone defenses with the hope that some of them will stick long enough to matter. You're shooting, stabbing, and pushing ladders away from the walls, but for every ladder you topple, 2 more appear. The Ottomans aren't just trying to breach your defenses. They're trying to exhaust you physically and emotionally before the main assault begins. It's working. After 2 hours of continuous fighting, your arms feel like lead, your arrows are running low, and you're starting to make mistakes. That's exactly when the second wave hits, and these are not irregulars. The Anatolian troops are professional soldiers, the kind of men who make warfare look like a well-rehearsed dance. They come at you with tactical precision, organized units, and equipment that makes your gear look like children's toys. While you've been fighting for your life against the Bashi bazooks, they've been calmly observing your defensive positions and identifying weak points. They hit the walls with coordinated attacks designed to exploit every tactical mistake you made during the first assault. That section where you ran out of arrows. They noticed. That spot where the wall repair is weakest. They mapped it. That blind spot in your crossbow coverage. They're already climbing through it. This is when you realize that the entire first assault was just reconnaissance in force. The Ottomans weren't trying to take the city with irregular troops. They were using them as living intelligence gathering, making you reveal your defensive capabilities before committing their real soldiers. It's like playing poker against someone who can see your cards, except instead of losing money, you're losing your empire. The fighting becomes more intense, more professional, and significantly more deadly. These soldiers know what they're doing, and they're doing it very well. You're no longer fighting desperate irregulars. You're fighting the medieval equivalent of special forces, and they're demonstrating why they have that reputation. But you're holding. Somehow, impossibly, you're holding. Giustiniani's defensive positions are working exactly as designed. The breach has become a killing ground where Ottoman soldiers pour in only to be cut down by crossfire from prepared positions. Your international volunteers are performing like the professionals they are, and even your exhausted local defenders are fighting with the desperate skill of men who know they're defending everything they care about. For a moment, just a moment, you allow yourself to think that maybe, possibly, you might actually survive this. That's when the third wave arrives, and you understand why Mehmed has been called the Conqueror. The Janissaries are not like other soldiers. They're not fighting for money, land, or conquest. They're fighting for the honor of their sultan and their god, and they approach warfare with the kind of systematic precision that makes modern military forces look casual. These men were taken as children, trained from birth to be soldiers, and molded into the most effective infantry force in the known world. They don't charge wildly or rely on individual heroics. They advance in formation, they follow orders without question, and they keep coming no matter how many of them die. The sound of their approach is different from the previous waves. Instead of chaotic screaming, you hear the rhythmic chant of men who've trained together for years, the steady beat of drums, and the distinctive sound of professional soldiers doing their job. They hit your defenses like a sledgehammer hitting glass. The walls that have protected Constantinople for 1,000 years suddenly seem very small and very fragile. The breach that your people have been desperately defending becomes a highway for Ottoman soldiers who advance with the mechanical precision of a factory assembly line. This is when everything goes wrong at once. A cannonball, not one of the massive shots from Orban's monster, but a smaller round from a field piece, strikes the wooden scaffolding where Giustiniani has been directing the defense. The impact doesn't kill him, but it wounds him badly enough that he has to be carried from the walls. The psychological effect is catastrophic. Giustiniani has been the backbone of your defense for months. His presence on the walls has been worth 1,000 men in terms of morale and tactical coordination. With him gone, your international volunteers begin to waver, and your local defenders start to panic. That's the moment when someone makes the decision that ends everything. Probably multiple people, in different places, all reaching the same conclusion at the same time. The city is lost, and continuing to fight is just choosing how to die. A gate opens. Not the main gate, a small postern gate that's supposed to be sealed during siege. Maybe it's opened by accident, maybe by design, maybe by someone who's decided that Ottoman rule is preferable to Ottoman massacre. The reason doesn't matter, because the result is the same. Ottoman soldiers pour through the opening like water through a burst dam. Not the main assault force. Those are still fighting their way through the breach. But fresh troops who suddenly find themselves inside the city's defenses with no one to stop them. The word spreads faster than the soldiers themselves. The Turks are inside the city. The walls are breached. The city is taken. Fight or flee, but choose quickly because time has run out. Some of your fellow defenders choose to fight. They form desperate last stands around the major gates, in the palace complex, at the Hagia Sophia. These are the men who've decided that dying for Constantinople is better than living under Ottoman rule. And they're going to make Mehmed pay for every street, every building, every foot of ground. Others choose to flee. Not cowardice, rational calculation. If the city is lost, then survival becomes the only remaining objective. Better to live and possibly fight another day than to die for a symbolic gesture that won't change anything. Most just choose to hide and hope for the best. Somewhere in the chaos, Constantine XI dies. Not dramatically, not with a final speech or heroic gesture, but the way most soldiers die in battle, quickly, violently, and without ceremony. His body won't be identified for days, and when it is, it will be recognized only by the purple silk boots he chose to wear into battle. The last Roman emperor dies like any other soldier, sword in hand, standing in a breach in the walls of the city his family has ruled for centuries. It's both the most anticlimactic and the most fitting end imaginable for an institution that began with Julius Caesar and ended with a man whose name was Constantine. By dawn, Ottoman banners are flying from the walls of Constantinople. The city that has stood as the eastern bulwark of Christianity for over 1,000 years is now the newest conquest of the Ottoman Empire. The medieval world has officially ended, and the modern world is about to begin. You survived. Somehow, impossibly, you survived. The question now is what kind of world you're going to wake up in. You're standing in the ruins of everything you once knew, and somehow the sun still rises. It's been 72 hours since the walls fell, And you're beginning to understand that surviving the end of the world is just the beginning of a much more complicated story. The Constantinople you wake up in on June 1st, 1453, is simultaneously the same city you've lived in your entire life and a completely alien place. The buildings are the same, the streets follow the same ancient patterns, even the smell of salt air from the Bosphorus is unchanged. But everything that gave those physical spaces meaning has been transformed overnight. You're no longer living in the eastern capital of the Roman Empire. You're living in Istanbul, the newest jewel in the Ottoman crown, and the symbolic center of what's about to become the most powerful empire in the world. The transformation didn't happen the way you expected. There was no systematic massacre, no burning of the city, no wholesale destruction of everything Christian and Byzantine. Instead, there was something far more unsettling careful, methodical, professional conquest that treated your apocalypse like a business transaction. Mehmed Kai, who is now calling himself Caesar of Rome, which must be making Julius Caesar spin in his grave, has approached the integration of Constantinople into his empire with the same systematic precision he used to conquer it. This isn't random pillaging, it's urban planning with a 500-year timeline. The first thing he did was stop the traditional 3-day sack that Ottoman law granted to soldiers who conquered a city through assault. This decision probably saved your life and the lives of thousands of your fellow survivors, but it also demonstrates something crucial about Mehmed's vision. He didn't capture Constantinople to destroy it. He captured it to own it. He wants your city functional, profitable, and strategically useful. Dead citizens don't pay taxes, ruined buildings don't generate commerce, and destroyed infrastructure doesn't project power. Mehmed is thinking like a CEO taking over a competitor's company. He wants the assets intact and the workforce productive. The Hagia Sophia has been converted to a mosque, but not destroyed. The great church that has been the spiritual heart of Eastern Christianity for nearly 1,000 years is now the centerpiece of Ottoman religious authority. Its Christian mosaics covered with plaster and verses from the Quran. It's still magnificent, still architecturally stunning, still the most impressive building in the city. It just serves a different god now. This is conquest as cultural transformation rather than cultural destruction. Mehmed isn't trying to erase Byzantine civilization. He's trying to absorb it, digest it, and make it part of something larger. It's like watching your hometown get gentrified by an empire. The Greek population isn't being expelled or enslaved en masse. Instead, they're being integrated into the Ottoman millet system, a remarkably sophisticated approach to governing diverse religious and ethnic communities that won't be matched by most European governments for another 300 years. You can keep your Orthodox faith, your Greek language, your traditional customs, and even your own legal system for most civil matters. All you have to do is accept that the ultimate political authority now speaks Turkish and prays to Allah. It's the medieval equivalent of a corporate merger. Your company culture can stay the same, but you've got new management and different quarterly objectives. Many of your fellow Byzantines are finding this surprisingly manageable. The tax burden under Ottoman rule is actually lower than it was under the last Byzantine emperors. The legal system is more predictable, and there's genuine opportunity for advancement based on merit rather than aristocratic birth. Some of the Greek merchant families are already adapting, learning Turkish, making connections with Ottoman officials, and positioning themselves to profit from their city's new role as the center of a transcontinental empire. It's both pragmatic and heartbreaking, the speed with which people can adjust to new realities when survival depends on it. But you're also witnessing something unprecedented in human history, the moment when the medieval world officially ends and the modern world begins. Not just politically, but conceptually. For over 1,000 years, European thinking has been organized around the idea of Christendom, a unified Christian civilization stretching from Ireland to Constantinople, bound together by shared religion, shared culture, and shared opposition to Islam. That idea died with Constantine's eye, and nothing comparable will ever replace it. From now on, European politics will be about nation-states, not universal empires, about balance of power, not religious unity, about commerce and technology, not feudal obligation and divine right. The fall of Constantinople doesn't just end the Byzantine Empire. It forces Western Europe to invent entirely new ways of thinking about politics, identity, and international relations. The Ottoman Empire that now controls your city represents the future in ways that most Europeans won't understand for another century. It's multi-ethnic, religiously tolerant, technologically advanced, and organized around merit-based bureaucracy rather than hereditary aristocracy. While Western European kingdoms are still struggling with feudal fragmentation and religious civil wars, the Ottomans have created a governmental system that can efficiently administer territories from the Danube to the Persian Gulf. They've solved problems that Europeans won't even recognize as problems until the 18th century. The scholars fleeing your fallen city are carrying more than just personal possessions. They're carrying the intellectual heritage of classical civilization that's been preserved in Byzantine libraries for 1,000 years. Greek manuscripts, classical texts, scientific treatises, and philosophical works that haven't been seen in Western Europe since the fall of Rome are about to flood into Italian universities. This dispersal of Byzantine scholarship will fuel the Renaissance, accelerate the scientific revolution, and contribute to the Protestant Reformation. The fall of Constantinople doesn't just end one story. It begins dozens of others that will reshape human civilization for centuries. You're living through what historians will call one of the great turning points in world history. But from your perspective, it mostly feels like trying to figure out how to buy bread when all the shop signs are suddenly in a different language. The city is filling up with new residents, Turkish administrators, Anatolian merchants, Balkan craftsmen, and people from across the Ottoman Empire who see opportunity in this newly conquered prize. Your neighborhoods are becoming cosmopolitan in ways that would have been impossible under Byzantine rule. The sound of the city is changing. Turkish mixed with Greek, Arabic prayers alongside Orthodox chants, the multilingual conversations of international traders conducting business in a dozen languages. Constantinople has always been a crossroads between Europe and Asia, but now it's the administrative center of an empire that spans 3 continents. In the palace, where Constantine XI spent his last night as emperor, Mehmed is planning military campaigns that will carry Ottoman power to the gates of Vienna, naval expeditions that will challenge European control of the Mediterranean, and diplomatic initiatives that will make the Ottoman Empire a player in European politics for the next 400 years. You survived the end of the Byzantine Empire, but you're also witnessing the birth of what will become one of history's most successful and longest-lasting political systems. The Ottoman Empire that conquered your city will outlast most of the European kingdoms that failed to come to your rescue. The world that's being born in the ruins of your old world is larger, more complex, more technologically advanced, and more culturally diverse than anything that came before it. It's not necessarily better or worse than what it replaced. It's just different in ways that will take centuries to fully understand. standing in your transformed city as the sun sets on your fourth day, as an Ottoman subject, you realize something profound. You're not just a survivor of historical change. You're a participant in it. Your adaptation, your choices, your daily decisions about how to live in this new world are part of the process by which history actually happens. The end of Byzantium wasn't just about emperors and battles and political systems. It was about ordinary people like you, figuring out how to navigate extraordinary circumstances and somehow finding ways to continue being human in the middle of world. Historical transformation. Tomorrow, you'll wake up in Istanbul, speak to your Turkish neighbors, and continue the long, complicated process of learning to live in the modern world. The Byzantine Empire is finished, but your story, like the story of human civilization itself, is just beginning a new chapter. And against all odds, it's a chapter worth reading. As we close this journey through the final days of Constantinople, we're left with a question that echoes across the centuries. What does it mean to witness the end of a world? For the defenders on those ancient walls, it meant watching 1,000 years of civilization collapse in 53 days. But for us, looking back across 5.5 centuries, it means something different. We see not just an ending, but a transformation. The moment when humanity stepped from the medieval world into the modern one, carrying forward both the wisdom and the scars of everything that came before. The fall of Constantinople reminds us that all empires, all certainties, all permanent institutions are actually temporary arrangements that exist only as long as people choose to maintain them. But it also shows us that human resilience, creativity, and dignity can survive even the most catastrophic changes. Those men and women who lived through May 29, 1453, couldn't know they were participating in one of history's great turning points. They were just trying to survive another day, protect their families, and maintain some sense of meaning in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. In other words, they were doing exactly what we do every day in our own times of change and challenge. The walls of Constantinople may have fallen, but the human capacity to adapt, endure, and find hope in hopeless circumstances proved, once again, to be unbreachable. Perhaps that's the most important lesson history can teach us, that every ending is also a beginning, and every collapse contains the seeds of whatever comes next. Until next time, thanks for taking this journey with me through one of history's most remarkable and tragic stories. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the walls may fall, but the story continues.